Welcome to the Mid Week Tease with me, Adelle Onyango, where I share some random and not too random thoughts on things. And in this episode, I want to talk to you about something that might make you a little uncomfortable, but it may also change just how you see yourself. Self-sabotage. I think a lot of us are walking around calling ourselves things that are not actually true. So you'll be saying things, okay, let me give an example of myself. I used to say that I was lazy and maybe that I lacked discipline. I also used to say that I was clumsy. Other examples, this is not what I used to tell myself, but maybe you're the type of person who says you are inconsistent. There are these statements, right, that we say about ourselves that might not be true. What could actually be happening is that you are self-sabotaging. And the wildest parts I've come to find is that you don't even realize that you're doing it. I used to look at self-sabotage as you trying to ruin your life. And I was in a relationship once with someone who I used to say, he's just always self-sabotaging. And I used to kind of look at it as this thing that he does on purpose to fuck up his life. But I've had a reframe. I do not think self-sabotage is you trying to ruin your life or is you being unserious about your dreams or you lacking ambition. I actually think now that self-sabotage is protection. I think it's your mind and your body trying to protect you from something it believes is unsafe. And that belief that this thing is unsafe, it didn't come from nowhere. There is a psychologist, I've told you about him before when we were talking about the theory around siblings. His name is Alfred Adler. And he talks about how the beliefs we form about ourselves in childhood really do shape how we move to the world as adults. He's one. Then there's people like Gabor Mate, who I've spoken about to you before, who often remind us that a lot of our behaviors are not random, they're coping mechanisms, right? They are things that we learned when we were in unsafe environments and we needed to figure out how to survive. So I don't see self-sabotage as this thing that you wake up in the morning consciously and decide to blow up your life repeatedly. I think it's something that comes about because something in you learned that certain things like success, like love, like visibility, like happiness are not safe. And so you developed coping mechanisms in your childhood to keep you away from or to survive what you believe are unsafe environments. Even when the thing is safe, is it landing? Okay, let's try and go deeper. Right? Somewhere along the way, you learned something about yourself. Maybe you learned that love is conditional. Maybe you learned that you're only valuable when you're perfect. Or maybe you learned that your voice doesn't matter, or that when you shine and get a lot of attention and visibility, what happens is you get judged, rejected, or abandoned. And so now as an adult, you do want more, you do want to grow, you do want to be seen, you do want success, you do want love, you do want happiness, but there's a part of you that's like, hey, last time we did that, it didn't go well. And so that part steps in and it pulls you back. And on the outside, we just think you keep screwing up your life and your chances. The part that is hard to sit with, right, is that you don't just end up in chaos. You don't just end up in, the self-sabotage. You choose it. You might not be choosing it consciously, but consistently you are choosing it because chaos is familiar. And if you grew up in environments where things were unpredictable or love felt unstable, where it was so rare to feel peace, then calmness doesn't feel safe. When things are calm, it feels suspicious. Let me my therapist always says, let me give a self disclosure, but let me give you a peek into my life. When I first moved out of Nairobi, and if you don't know, I moved out of Nairobi to a smaller town that's probably like an hour out. And this was the first time in my life that I was going to be living alone. And previously to that, my life was full of noise, good noise, bad noise, healthy noise, unhealthy noise. And I always had a place to run to or noise to run to when things were getting too real internally. And when I was younger, in my childhood, I grew up for the first chunk of my life, maybe 10 years, in a home that was just hectic because my dad was physically abusive to my mom. And so you can imagine there was just unpredictability with his behavior, right? So there was no calmness there. And when it was there, I was constantly waiting for when it was going to be, disrupted by my dad. And even afterwards, like, we lived with relatives after my mom left my dad. And then when we moved to our own place, we still lived with one relative, an aunt. And so, and she was not the kindest person. She would always start some shit. And so, again, the unpredictability is there, right? Where if things are too calm, I'm like, you're taking me for a ride here. You know what I mean? And so when I moved out, first time living alone, life is so much more peaceful, slower, a lot of nature, calmer. Initially, I would do anything to run away from it because I was just like, something's going to go wrong. And I constantly was just like waiting for the crisis, waiting for someone to come and kick me out of this house, waiting for, I don't know. I was waiting for a disruption because I was just like, this calmness feels very suspicious. Now, what I thank myself for doing, and it's because I was in active therapy at the time, is I didn't self sabotage, right? Someone who would self sabotage in that situation when they're waiting for something to go wrong and they feel like the calmness is suspicious, what they would do is recreate the very thing that they say they don't want. So they would overthink or they would pick the emotionally unavailable person so it would disrupt the calmness. They would delay the opportunity, so that there is some heightened emotion. And maybe if they were meant to be applying for something, etc., they would find ways to disrupt the calmness so that that thing that they're most comfortable in, the chaos, the unpredictability, would come up. Because on the outside, if you have a lens where you've done a lot of healing, you'd be like, but why are you choosing to disrupt what's healthy and cling on to what's unhealthy? It's because internally, as a person who's doing all of these self-sabotaging, your nervous system isn't choosing what's healthy. Your nervous system is like, that one I recognize. That chaos over there, I recognize it. This calmness, I don't know this is. So yeah, I don't wanna mess with this one. But that chaos, I have the tools to maneuver that one. And there's so many ways self-sabotage shows up. And I think sometimes we wait for it to be this big blow up, but it doesn't always look dramatic, hey? Sometimes it appears in your everyday habits. When you're there saying, I work better under pressure, so that you can wait until last minute to do something. Maybe you're just avoiding starting because you're scared of how much success could come from this thing you're meant to be starting. Sometimes self-sabotage looks like you overthinking every single move until you end up not moving at all. Could it be you're overthinking because you're scared of the success or all the good that could come from that move that you're overthinking? Sometimes self-sabotage could look like perfectionism. You know, the whole I'll start when I'm ready, I'll post this thing when it's perfect. It's not yet perfect. I can roll it out. First of all, perfect doesn't exist. Okay? Could it be that you have a fear of that success? Like, what if this thing is successful? So let's sabotage it with this perfectionism. Maybe it looks like, I don't know, quitting right before things start working. Oh, that one's a real one. Maybe it looks like staying in relationships where you're not fully met and you're aware. You're aware. I'm in a relationship where my needs are not met, where I'm not seen, etc. But as much as it's unhealthy, it's something familiar and I understand it and I'm scared of leaving and finding something beautiful, because what if I find something beautiful and then it's taken away from me? Am I shouting? I don't know. Self-sabotage can look like playing small. It can look like not speaking up, not trying, not putting yourself out there. And a lot of the time, it feels so justified, right? Which is why it's so difficult to catch it. There's one thing I want to go deeper into, which is a fear of being seen. And I think this is one of the ways very many of us self-sabotage, because we have a real fear of being seen and putting ourselves or our work out there, because being seen is vulnerable. I mean, like when people really see you, your ideas, your voice, your talent, they also get to judge you. They also get to reject you. They also get to misunderstand you. Let me give another example. So I'm a poet. I've been a poet since I was a teenager. Like, I wrote my first poem when I was 11 or 12. And I still remember feeling so much love for this thing. I even, at that time, at that age, I had this little folder I had made from manila paper where I would slot in all the poems I was writing. I loved poetry from when I was 12. I remember when I was 15, my mom buying me this book, and it was an anthology of poetry by this Jamaican poet. And her and I, one night, start reading it, and it was marvelous. And she was trying to do it in the like patois accent. I remember falling in love with a guy I should not have been with. But one of the things that made me fall in love with him is that he loved poetry, so that really blinded me. I've always loved poetry, but I've always been so scared of sharing. And so I started off for a couple of years sharing small snippets of my poetry. So like 3 lines here, 4 lines there on my socials. And I've been writing a lot more after writing or co-writing my first book. I've been writing a lot more long format, and I just was so scared, so scared. And this year, well, last year when I sat down with my manager, one of my goals for this year was, what, I wanna share my writing. Initially, I was gonna hide it in a Substack, and then I thought, no, you're doing that thing where you are scared of being seen, because my writing is very personal. And then I started this year sharing a lot of my long format writing on my Instagram. And my writing is one of the ways I work towards liberating African women. And it's very real and raw, because I talk about my reflections, but also some of the things I have experienced firsthand. Now, I will say it's going incredibly. I feel great. I love it. Oh my God, I'm enjoying it so, so much. I don't have any of my comments sections open on any of my social media. Just, I find it very noisy when they're open, so they're off. But I can see a lot of African women from all over the continent in the diaspora engaging and finding themselves in my writing. It feels great. However, there are people, and it's mainly men, so irritating, from my past who like DM me. So I got a DM from a guy I went to high school with, and he was like, "Oh, is everything okay?" And I just thought, this just shows you did not read the piece. And the piece I wrote about was on how women need to choose themselves as opposed to waiting to be chosen by a man. And so I had one that talked about my divorce. Guys, I got divorced so many years ago. Like, I'm over it. When I write about it, I'm writing in terms of reflections and just like how women are primed to aspire to certain things, right? Anyway, this guy sends me a message like, "Are you okay?" And so I say, "Lol, why wouldn't I be?" Because I'm like, anybody with half a brain who read the entire piece wouldn't ask that. And then he responds and says, "Some of us carry a lot and we make it seem like we're okay." It was a long, maybe not long, but it was like a message like that. I rolled my eyes so hard and I just kept it pushing. But it was a reminder to me that I remember telling myself, this doesn't mean you need to stop, because when you put yourself out there and you work out there, sometimes people will misunderstand you or use that as a tool to try and like get more info or gossip from you. But that doesn't mean that you should self-sabotage. Okay? Because sometimes self-sabotage is not about failure. It can be about hiding, about dimming yourself, delaying, distracting. Because, like, there is this small part of you that's asking, what happens if I actually show up fully and it's not received well? Or what happens if I am received well and now I have to sustain it? You know, that's another part that I'm also not leaning into of like, oh my God, people are really connecting with your writing. Oh shit, now you have to step it up. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't even know what stepping it up means. I just need to keep writing my genuine thoughts and not self-sabotage. Now, self-sabotage isn't something you just snap out of, because these patterns and the things that you learned, they worked, right? At some point in your life, they protected you. They kept you safe. They kept you from feeling things you weren't ready to feel. And your body remembers that. It has this data, and it's like, this worked. This is unfamiliar. That it feels unsafe. Please sabotage that one. Let's stay here where we have the tools and we've been through this before and we know how to make it work. But I think where you begin to change is not by shaming yourself, it's not by forcing yourself, but becoming aware. There's so much power in self awareness, in catching the thought, in noticing your patterns, in saying, oh, I've noticed when things start going really well, my mind starts scanning for a crisis and sometimes even creating it. Or when things go really well, I start to pull back, I start to delay, I start to distract myself. And then you start to catch the thought, and you're catching it earlier. You're not catching it when everything has fallen apart. You're catching it in the moment where you're about to avoid doing something, and then you pause and you say, hey, hold up. What am I actually feeling right now? And once you perfect that, then you start small. You start to build your self-trust in small ways. You do what you said you would do, even if it's not perfect. If you said, like for me, I'm going to put out 2 long form pieces of writing every month. Do it, even when it's not perfect. Show up, even if it's messy. You need to start understanding that discomfort doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Sometimes discomfort is just your body adjusting to something new that could be something better. So if you have felt seen in this episode, please, you are not broken. The patterns that you learned in childhood, they make sense. Imagine they do, but they're not permanent. And the next time, you're about to start something or things are going well, and you start shrinking or delaying or pulling back or about to create chaos or a crisis, catch the thought, pause, ask yourself, am I in this moment protecting myself, aka self-sabotage? If you resonated with this episode, and I really do hope you did, make sure you share it with someone that you love. Thanks for listening to the Mid Week Tease, a Legally Clueless Africa production. Episodes go out every Wednesday, and you can learn more about us by going to legallycluelessafrica.com.